March 14th to the 16th, more than 700 college students from across the country gathered here at Tulane University in New Orleans for the inaugural meeting of CGIU, the collegiate offshoot of the Clinton Global Initiative, with the goal of the weekend to put ideas into action.
And I kept thinking, we need to do something for people who have all the ideas and most of the future and not enough money to do everything they'd like, but they may change the world.
There are a lot of people who believe that you have to wait until maybe your hair is a little bit more my father's color than our color to make a difference. And we think that CGIU is the greatest repudiation to that.
I'm fascinated by how many times a very small, simple idea just revolutionizes things. Do you have any examples of anything?
My name is Fitzgerald Fevrier.
My name is Mariam Adil.
Deandra Nichols.
Yitek Huang.
My name is Gavin Armstrong, and I'm the president and CEO of the Lucky Ironfish Project, a social enterprise that is working to eliminate iron deficiency worldwide.
Now I'm the founder and CEO of Think of Us, that provides foster youth in the United States with the resources and support to empower themselves during their transition to adulthood.
A social enterprise working to expand access to solar power in Nicaragua.
In big cities, there's hundreds of thousands of events every single day, and there's so much food, and right now it's just being thrown out. We see that ability to take that extra food and give it to the people who need it.
I actually was in Washington, D.C. this weekend. I was at the Clinton Global Initiative University. It was an incredibly impressive group of young people.
This is intimidating. You are an incredible group of people. I am going to be the dumbest person in the room tonight.
I think I should spend the rest of my life trying to give other people the same set of life chances that I had.
Be grateful for the opportunities you've had, and then go and work with those who don't have your opportunities to create the future you want to live in.
Be consistent and be persistent, and never ever give up. Never become bitter or hostile, and never hate, for hate is too heavy a burden to bear.
This is the greatest time to be young and involved, because it'll be the first 100 years where we will all live to see our own accountability for what we did or did not participate in.
Your ability to meet the challenges that you will face is greater collectively and individually than at any time in human history.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Vice Chair, Clinton Foundation, Chelsea Clinton.
To our hosts here at Northeastern. Yeah, you can applaud for yourselves. Just such a warm welcome to all of our CGIU students. This is probably my most favorite weekend of the year, and I just could not be more excited and more thrilled to be here with all of you. And I'm looking forward to this evening and over the next couple of days getting to learn more about your commitments, learn more about you. And I hear there's a student, Jocelyn, who's looking for me, so I will find you afterwards, because apparently we look like one another. So I can't really see too well with the glare of the lights, otherwise I would say raise your hand. But Jocelyn, I will find you. Back to the business at hand. Up in the bleachers, okay. Now back to CGIU. Really, I'm especially excited for this CGIU because it's our 10th CGIU, and it's just really so humbling and continually awe-inspiring to me that what began as a simple effort to give students the resources to maximize the potential impact of their commitments to action has now grown into a community of more than 8,700 students from around the world who share a core belief that changing the world for the better isn't just someone else's business, it's really up to all of us. This year, we add more than 1,200 students to our CGIU community. It's our largest CGIU ever. You represent, please. You represent 95 countries, 282 colleges and universities. Collectively, you've brought more than 900 commitments here, and inevitably your diversity of valuable and valued perspectives. I really can't wait to hear more about the commitments I've read about and I've listened to kind of YouTube videos about, and can't wait to introduce you to some of the people that have really inspired me over the history of CGIU, some of whom you saw in the video that just played. I want to especially thank President Aoun and everyone here at Northeastern University. I know these events hopefully are fun for the community, but also can be a little bit disruptive. So I'm really grateful to the entire faculty, management, staff, and all of the students here. So please give Northeastern another round of applause for welcoming us so warmly. And I want, because President Aoun said that he wasn't going to talk about Northeastern, he wasn't going to brag on Northeastern, I want to share a little bit about why we are so grateful and proud to be here for CGIU at Northeastern. With those of you who may not know as much about its long distinguished history in community service, in social entrepreneurship, in being catalytic for making the world a more equitable place. Their Social Enterprise Institute is giving the next generation of global business leaders tools to solve problems across the world. In South Africa is one example. They've created a micro venture fund to give seed funding and micro investments to local communities. In the Dominican Republic is another example. Northeastern University has created a loan portfolio of over $135,000 that are now supporting more than 285 new businesses. Northeastern students themselves have raised over $90,000 through a variety of grassroots initiatives to invest in 12 different projects throughout Africa and Latin America. These are only a few examples of what the Northeastern community has done and continues to do that are a real testament to its belief that meaningful change can and must come from everywhere, including our great universities. It's a tradition that is very much in line with our mission at CGIU, as you'll see throughout this weekend, including our Day of Action on Sunday. As the great Dr. Jim Kim, one of the founders of Partners in Health and the current president of the World Bank, has often said, optimism is a moral choice, and a choice that by necessity, I believe, requires action. Your commitments to action clearly demonstrate that you share that belief, and your optimism hopefully will be kind of bolstering and infectious for all of you. I know that it certainly is for me. And I know that we must do whatever we can to not only advance progress, but protect progress, and to support each other in that work. I think that arguably matters more now than ever before. Thankfully, we see optimism in action and collaborative support for one another in CGIU every year. So just a couple of examples to add to those that you saw flashed across the screen. Last year, Abdelaziz Lawani from the University of Kentucky committed to develop a program that would use drones to identify and fight illegal, unsustainable practices affecting biodiversity in Benin, Niger, and Burkina Faso, including illegal poaching, uncontrolled brush fires, and illegal agricultural encroachments. Since the CGIU meeting in 2016, He has successfully trained more than 200 stakeholders, including park rangers, students, and faculty of the National School of Wildlife and Protected Management in Benin, on the use of drones to identify those illegal practices. And they, in turn, are now using drones to tackle issues related to small-scale farming that's being pushed out by illegal, larger efforts, and fighting elephant poaching, something that is very close to my heart. At the CGIU meeting in 2011, Agnes Igoya from the University of Minnesota committed to establish a rehabilitation center for the victims of human trafficking in her native Uganda. Her goal was to create a center for 20 women and girls that would provide schooling, vocational training, and support, and to train 1,000 law enforcement officers on how to recognize and combat and stop human trafficking. Today, Agnes has far exceeded that goal. In addition to building the rehabilitation center, she's trained over 2,000 law enforcement officers on counter-human trafficking strategies. She's fundraised for and been able to provide over 90,000 books to children in Uganda about protecting themselves and supporting themselves. And she has also founded the Huts for Peace program for homeless women who have survived violence and trafficking in northern Uganda. For her work, she's received well-due recognition from the United Nations and others. A couple of commitments that I'm particularly excited about this year include some work that is being done right down the road, across the river at MIT, and some that's being done a little further away. I really hope that you'll find these as inspiring as I do, and I hope that you'll share what most inspires you with each other and with me throughout the weekend. So the team from MIT has created a warm, easy-to-carry, durable blanket to help protect refugees at the Karatepe camp in Greece from dangerous, frigid, cold temperatures, so that no parent ever has to worry about her or his child freezing to death or themselves. Rachel Groberman and Vicki Liu call this the Dura Blanket, and they will partner with Movement on the Ground, a local NGO, to help distribute more than 300 blankets at the refugee camp, and hopefully that's just the first of many such distributions to come. Also new this year is a commitment from Joel Zeballos and Camille Brinke from Virginia Commonwealth University. You're so quiet when I talk about respective universities. You can cheer for each other and your own universities. This is serious work, but it also should be joyful work. The joy of knowing that you can make a difference, the joy of cheering for others who are making a difference, the joy of supporting others who are making a difference will help sustain you in work that invariably will bring more heartache and pain than most of us could ever imagine. So back to the Virginia Commonwealth University, the cue to cheer for Virginia Commonwealth University. Okay, there you go. Thank you. This can be interactive. So the students from VCU will create training workshops for faculty and staff at their school to establish a network of on-campus allies for undocumented students at their university and in their community of Richmond, Virginia. They hope to also implement this training program across the local school district to help train staff and teachers in the local school district to also act as allies to undocumented students and to undocumented parents. These are just two of the more than 900 inspiring commitments that all of you have brought to CGIU across a range of challenges, across a range of geographies, tackling problems in new ways in new places, and maybe in familiar ways in new places, and all of which can make a profound difference today and in the future. So thank you for bringing your commitments and your optimism. I hope that you will use this time to get to know each other. I hope that you will take advantage of the skill sessions. I hope that you will ask questions of the panelists, of the mentors, of the people, all of whom are choosing to be here with all of you to help maximize the possible efficacy, efficiency, and impact of your work. Please never be afraid to ask a question. The worst that anyone is going to do is say they don't know or no. But they might say yes. They might say, here's what I would do. They might say, here's someone I can connect you with in this NGO or this foundation to help advance your work further. And you won't know unless you ask. I also think we're all going to learn a lot this weekend by listening to each other, listening to each other's stories, perspectives, ideas, hopes, and I know that we all are bound together by our shared sense of optimism. Otherwise, none of us would be here this evening. So thank you for giving me a little more optimism. I'm looking forward to not only meeting Jocelyn, who's somewhere in the back, but many of you over the next few days, learning from you, learning with you, listening to as many of you as I can possibly meet. And now it is my great honor to introduce someone whom I always learn something from when I listen to him, who I really can't wait to hear what he has to say, because I think particularly at this moment in time, he offers a fairly unique and important perspective. But I know of all the things that he's done, one of the things he's most proud of is the CGI University community, and being able to even provide a little bit of support, inspiration, and fuel for all that the students who have been in these seats before you have done, are doing, and will do, and all that you will do over the next days, weeks, months, years, decades to come. So it is my great honor, as always, to introduce my father, President Clinton.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. First, thank you, Chelsea, for setting the stage for what we hope will be a valuable and enduring memory in all of your lives. Welcome to all of you who have traveled from all over America and around the world to be here. As Chelsea said, I believe this is the largest student crowd we have ever had in 10 years. So I'm very glad you'd be here. Let me begin with just a few thank yous and ask you to join me. I want to thank the organizations and individuals whose support is making this meeting possible, beginning with our lead sponsors, the Ford Foundation, the Peter Peterson Foundation, the Ramsey Social Justice Foundation, Pedro Torres Mackey, Khalid Miles, Andy Nejas, and Kevin Shue. Thank you all. Let's give them a big hand. I want to say a special word of thanks to the CGIU network. Those are colleges and universities which, over and above sending their students here, provide funding for students to participate in the meeting and to begin implementing commitments. One of the things that we found out in the early years is that a lot of students just needed a few $100s or a couple of $1,000s to make a beginning. And now this network of colleges gives us this year almost $1 million to spread among the commitment makers. I want to thank the volunteers. Thank you. If you look around the halls during the next day or so, you'll see a rather large number of volunteers, many of them students here at Northeastern. I want to thank them. Without them, we couldn't have this meeting. I want to say a few words about Northeastern. I really appreciated what Chelsea said about this school. I had the privilege of speaking at graduation here in 1993 in my first year as president, before most of you were born. Then I came back here 9 days before I left office to say thank you to the people of Massachusetts who have been so good to me and supporting the things I tried to do. Northeastern holds a very special place in the landscape of higher education for the social entrepreneurship work Chelsea mentioned, and is the U.S. oldest cooperative school. I want to tell you what that means. All of you from other universities, 97% of the students here, 97% do 6 months of cooperative work with NGOs, businesses, governments in 132 countries as a part of their education. And most of them do 2 of those stints before they get their degrees. So, I thank the students, faculty, staff, from the classrooms to the dining rooms for welcoming us. And now, I would like to invite to the stage for opening remarks our host, the president of this great university, Joseph Aoun.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. I didn't hear anything. Good evening, everyone. Yes. And welcome to Northeastern. Thank you, President Clinton, for that generous introduction. And it is wonderful to have you back at Northeastern. I also would like to thank Chelsea Clinton for her tireless dedication to the Clinton Global Initiative University. Let's give her a round of applause. Important causes need champions. And Chelsea, you are the unrivaled champion of CGIU. I said we are welcoming President Clinton back to Northeastern. And you heard from the President that he gave 2 important speeches here in 1993 and in 2001. The President told me he loves this place. Mr. President, this place loves you back. Thank you for being with us. Earlier this week, I went into our archives and read the speeches you gave, Mr. President. Many of the valuable lessons you shared with our community back then remain relevant for us today. In both speeches, you spoke about the power, indeed the obligation of young people to be the architects of our collective future and to be the bridge to a new century. And this brings me to my primary role this evening, to welcome you, the students of CGIU 2017. Give yourselves a round of applause. Welcome. You have traveled here from all over the United States and from 90 countries. You represent 250 different colleges and universities around the world. Even more important, you represent the promise of a new generation, the power of a global community, and the hope of our shared dreams. Students, your presence here demonstrates something very simple, but also very profound. You have a passion to make tomorrow better than today. That passion to serve, to uplift, and to create is perhaps more powerful than you realize. It is, I believe, what distinguishes us as human beings and what gives us a unique advantage. It's an advantage that will serve you well. We live in a world of miraculous technologies. Machines are making quantum leaps in their power to think and learn. In the next few decades, intelligent machines may eliminate up to half of all existing jobs. Finance, medicine, media, countless jobs are subject to the threat of automation. And in a world already experiencing vast inequality, automation has the potential to widen the gulf even further. I believe we can secure a future in which all humans can prosper. But we will need an education that makes us robot-proof. Yes, each of us will need to understand technology and master the power of big data. These will become basic competencies. But to really succeed in a world of smart machines, we must nurture and hone the qualities and attributes that make us uniquely human. These qualities are at the heart of what you are doing here at CGIU. Over the next few days, you will focus on being entrepreneurial, creative, and culturally agile. You will harness your empathy and engage with others. I have read through your CGIU commitments. They are truly inspirational. Some of you, as Chelsea said, are focused on mentoring refugee children displaced through the war. I have never heard of a robot that felt the desire to support a child in need. Another one of your commitments is to stem the opioid crisis here in the US. Again, I never heard of an algorithm that was compelled to combat drug abuse. Such motivations are beyond the grasp of machines, and yet they fuel humanity's brightest energies. By attending CGIU, you are cultivating those energies, and you are committing to achieve goals larger than yourselves. In your commitments, you're stepping outside the classroom to hone your uniquely human qualities. At Northeastern, we call this experiential learning. Experiential learning nourishes creativity and flexes the ligaments of the mind. In our technology-driven future, the advantage will be with those who remain mentally flexible, adaptable, and eager to acquire and generate new knowledge. So when it comes to learning, I ask you that you never stop. You are free to dance across the commencement stage, but I urge you to see your graduation as the starting gate, not the finish line. Return often to the well of knowledge. Refill your cup and drink deep. Upgrade your learning as you would your technology. As you do this, focus on honing those uniquely human attributes, the passions that burn inside you, the boundless optimism that brought you here today. As President Clinton said in 2001, right here in this arena, solving the world's problem is about addition and multiplication. It is not about subtraction and division. I hope all of us will carry this message forever. The commitments you are making and the problems you're tackling cannot be solved in silos. They cannot be addressed by individuals acting alone. We live in a global community that is connected by the free flow of ideas and by people working together. That interconnection unites us. You are here to unleash the flow of ideas and transform them into works of lasting value. You inspire all of us. We know that our future is in good hands. I thank you in advance for all that you will do to shape our human journey and lead us to a better tomorrow. President Clinton, thank you again for being with us. As I mentioned earlier, this place loves you. They are showing it now. They will show it throughout the next 2 days. President Clinton, the stage is yours. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. President. I thank you and your wife, Zaina, for joining us. Now, I'm anxious to get to the panel. This first panel is full of fascinating, interesting people, and they are good role models for all of us. But before I do, we're going to open it with some commitments. Because the heart of CGI is commitments. When we started CGI, then we started CGIU, then we had one in Asia, one in Latin America, the second in Asia. We had them everywhere. And we started one just for the American economy after the crash. I just had this instinct that people of all ages and backgrounds were only too happy to talk and learn, but they actually wanted to do something, and they wanted to be challenged to do something. All of our research has shown that the kind of commitments you have made here work best. That is, diverse groups make better decisions than lone geniuses or homogeneous groups, and that actually deciding to do something can make a difference. I suppose the most obvious CGI commitment was the one that a young person made several years ago to let people use their cell phones in developing countries to check the integrity of drugs, because up to 30% of the medicine going into poor countries is adulterated or corrupted or just with nothing in it. So it seemed like a good idea at the time. It grew into a company called Sproxel, which is now, listen to this, provided checks for 50 million drug shipments to low-income countries around the world. On the other hand, you can't get discouraged if it doesn't work out to be that big, whatever your commitment is. And you shouldn't diminish yourself or your prospects. One of my irreverent but quite brilliant staff members in the White House once looked at me and said, "You know, you have 10 ideas a day." And 2 or 3 of them are pretty good. You got to keep going. But if you don't do, you'll never know. And in the doing, whether it brings success or failure, you will learn to do better. And in the doing, a lot of our labeling and preconceptions fall away. So let's begin with a lightning round of commitment progress reports from CGI alumni.
Hello, my name is Yulkendi Valdez, a recent graduate of Babson College right here in Wellesley. 3 years ago, my partner, Josuel Plasencia, and I, both of us first-generation Dominican Americans, made a commitment to start Project 99 with the goal of inspiring and enabling underrepresented millennials to become future workforce leaders. Today, Black and Latinx comprise over 30% of the millennial population. With such strong and growing representation, Project 99's goal is to diversify the workforce leadership population to reflect the overall population. Project 99, we create and scale workforce initiatives to foster social and economic equity, and we work with young professionals of all backgrounds on issues of identity awareness and personal growth. Over the past year, we have turned our commitment into a full-time business. We have grown our client base to include Mary Institute and Country Day School, one of the top prestigious K-12 institutions in St. Louis, Missouri. Humano, one of the largest insurance companies in the Caribbean, and SAP, a top global software company.
Hello, everyone. I am Jean-Paul Laurent, originally from Haiti, and now a graduate student at Columbia University. I am the founder and CEO of Unspoken Smiles Foundation, a nonprofit organization started in 2014 that seeks to promote dental hygiene, health, and treatment in underserved locations. In low-income, underserved communities, tooth decay is widespread. At Unspoken Smiles, we implement a dental hygiene curriculum for children to encourage healthy lifelong habits, partner with dental professionals who visit such communities to prevent and treat oral disease, and through our dental training program, we also create work opportunities for women and boost the economies and the communities in which we work. To date, we have served over 5,000 children in Haiti, Kurdistan, and Romania. By the end of the year, we hope to more than double that number in these countries and elsewhere. Our fellowships will serve to promote dental wellness and provide meaningful work for previously unemployed women. Going forward, we will grow our community of oral health professionals by expanding our Unspoken Smiles Fellowship Program to fight oral disease and create jobs in developing countries. And we will focus on developing a distribution of oral hygiene products to our website. Thank you. God bless America.
Everyone, my name is Reveille Gumi, and I'm a student at the University of Missouri, Kansas City School of Medicine. In 2009, the Kansas City Free Eye Clinic began as a CGIU commitment to provide eye exams and eyeglasses to the uninsured and homeless population in Kansas City. By partnering with medical schools and other organizations, this student-run clinic recruited volunteers and has treated over 3,000 patients and distributed over 1,000 pairs of free eyeglasses since its inception. In many cases, ocular diseases were diagnosed and treated before they threatened to cause blindness. In 2012, the clinic relocated to a location densely populated with homeless shelters to target underserved populations there. This year, we are seeking to reach the increasing number of refugees entering the Kansas City area and enhance their access to eye health care. We will add to our clinic hours for refugee patients and partner with refugee support groups in our area to target this population. Going forward, we hope to have a new mobile eye clinic to serve the refugee community as well. We are proud of our partnerships with various community organizations, domestic violence shelters, literacy groups, schools, and other clinics that have enhanced our services and outreach. Thank you.
Hello and namaste. My name is Prakash Bazgain and I'm a founder and president of Lips Plates. I grew up in a remote place in Nepal and now a student at City University of New York. Lips Plates seeks to decrease pollution, minimize the impact of global warming, and improve the employment prospects for women in rural Nepal by providing and selling plates completely made of lips. New York City restaurants and food carts use thousands of our plates every week. This production creates jobs for 72 women in Nepal and 15 in New York City. Our products are available online as well. Plates made from leaves, or we call it topiary in Nepal, have been used for centuries in Nepal and India. They are better for the public environment and safety for the public consumption and do not add any food service expense. Leaves plates are 100% compostable regardless of how they are discarded. We are committed to minimize the carbon footprints in the food service industry through our environmental awareness and the growing use of leaf plate in the university cafeterias around the country. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Trang. I'm from Vietnam and currently a senior at Brown University. In 2006, my partners Keisha, Matlek, Victor Wang, and I made a commitment to the millions of people with limb disability in Vietnam and other developing countries. There are tens of thousands of prosthetic limbs replaced annually in the US. However, regulation and liability issues forbid the reuse of them here. We collect these used devices that would be discarded and distribute them to places in need. Penta partners with prosthetic clinics in Asia where devices are refitted for patients at a fraction of the cost of a new one. Since we began, we have fitted over 150 prosthetics in Vietnam and Thailand. By the end of this year, Penta expects to have pickup sites at 50 clinics and fit over 400 patients. We are growing our clinics in Asia, our number of patients served, and the number of partnerships with providers in the US. In addition, Penta's digital platform connects donors and recipients to offer transparency into our work and build an emotional connection that we hope will foster global awareness of people and places in need. Thank you.
Before they leave, I want to introduce briefly one more person to show you what this can grow into. We have at least one member of Congress here. His son is a student at Northeastern, and while he doesn't look old enough, he was actually in the Congress when I was president. His name is Jim McGovern. He represents a working class, ethnically diverse district whose heartbeat is Worcester, not far from here. So Jim McGovern, who was consumed, understandably, with the challenges that his own constituents were facing, came to me one day and said, you know, we've got to do something about all these poor kids around the world who aren't in school, especially girls. There's a great disparity in enrollment, but there are just too many kids who aren't in school. And he said, I think we should offer to feed them. America should feed them if they'll come to school. So I said, well, let me see what I can do. We worked around and found $300 million in the Agriculture Department budget. And we reallocated it from other things that we thought were not imperative. And we passed Jim McGovern's bill. Within 2 years, there were 6 million more students in school. He lives the spirit of CGIU. So if you're here somewhere, I saw him earlier, stand up, Congressman McGovern, so we can say thank you. There he is. Thank you. So sometimes good people actually are rewarded for good work, and that's a good thing. Let's give them another hand, and we'll start the program.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our panelists. Hurricane Harvey teenage hero, Thomas Edwards. Co-founder, Jamboree Fund, Sandra Uiringimana. Race relations expert and musician, Daryl Davis. Olympic medalist, activist, and entrepreneur, Ibtihaj Muhammad. And our moderator, President Clinton.
So, take a seat. Each of these people, in their own way, has done something to reach beyond themselves, which brings them in contact with a culture not entirely identical to their own. Some of them out of pain, others out of hope, others because they think it's nutty when people are divided for no good reason, when they could do so much together. So I want to begin by giving each of them a chance, in effect, to make a brief opening statement by asking, tell the people what you do, how you got here, and what you think you and all the rest of us owe our fellow human beings.
I was secretly hoping that you didn't call on me first. Hi, my name is Ibtihaj Muhammad. I'm a member of the United States Olympic team, and I'm the first, thank you. I'm the first Muslim woman to represent Team USA while wearing the hijab, and also the first, thanks. Thank you so much. My journey as an athlete started from a very young child, and like most Americans in our family, our lives are kind of, circulated around our lives as athletes. And for me, just growing up and participating in different sports, my parents always struggled to find a sport suitable for me as a Muslim girl, and that I cover everything with the exception of my face and my hands. So to discover the sport of fencing, a sport where the athletes are fully covered, we wear long jackets, we wear long pants, and as a kid I always thought that they were helmets that they were wearing. I later found out that they're not helmets, they're masks. But to discover this sport that just kind of uniquely accommodated to my religious beliefs was revolutionary for me as a kid. It was the first time where I felt like I fit in with my teammates, where I wasn't seen for being black, where I wasn't seen for being Muslim, where I wasn't seen for being a girl. And to have this sport from the age of 12 when I first found it, to take me to different parts of the world. I've traveled to over 26 or 27 countries with Team USA, and to then qualify for an Olympic team and bring home a medal for our country, it's definitely, I didn't see that in my cards at the age of 12, but I'm very happy things turned out the way that they did, and I feel so thankful. I know what sport has done for me as an American. I see the work that still needs to be done, and that is really my goal right now in life, is to share my story and to provide inspiration for those who have ever felt as if they, or have ever been told that they don't belong. And that's really my life mission right now.
Now, thank you. You were great in the Olympics. I love watching her, and I made up my mind if I ever saw her with a sword in her hand, I would run the other way. Now, Daryl Davis is an interesting fellow. He's got a story that, in a way, I could have had, but I first came across him when he was playing with the late, great Chuck Berry. And this guy actually went out and met members of the Ku Klux Klan and talked them into meeting with him, talking to him, and he wrote a book about it and lived to tell the tale. So how'd you get into this, and how'd you get them to relate to you?
Well, thank you for asking. Well, actually my first experience with racism began not too far from where we're sitting right now. When I was 10 years old, I was living in Belmont, Massachusetts, and that was my first experience. And I was marching with a Cub Scout troop in which I was the only black scout. And we were marching from Lexington to Concord to commemorate the ride of Paul Revere. And somewhere down the parade route, people were cheering and all that kind of stuff, but somewhere down the parade route, I began getting hit with bottles and soda pop cans and rocks and debris from the street by just a small group of the spectators on the sidewalk. And being naive, I was the only black scout in the whole march. And being naive to racism, my first inclination was, oh, those people over there don't like the scouts. I didn't realize I was the only one targeted until my den mother, my cub master, troop leader all came rushing back and huddled over me with their bodies to escort me out of the danger. And when I asked them why, they just kept saying, shh, move along, Daryl, move along, you'll be okay. They never answered my question. When I got home, my mom and dad, who were not at the parade, were fixing me up with mercurochrome and Band-Aids and asking me, how did you fall down and get all scraped up? I told them I didn't fall down. I told them exactly what had happened. And for the first time in my life, my parents sat me down and explained to me what racism was. At the age of 10, I'd never even heard the word. And so I formed a question in my mind at the age of 10, and that question was, how can you hate me when you don't even know me? And so for the next 48, 49 years, I've been looking for the answer to that question. So, I figured, well, not finding it in books, I bought books on black supremacy, white supremacy, anti-Semitism, the Ku Klux Klan, the Nazis in Germany, the neo-Nazis over here, but none of those books answered my question. So I figured, well, who better to go to than someone who would join an organization whose whole premise was disliking and excluding those who did not believe as they believed or who did not look as they looked. So that's where I got that start.
And how'd you get people to talk to you? Who's the first Klansman you met? Where did that person live, and how did you get that person to talk to you?
Well, I studied up on it, and the best tool is education. Learn as much as you can about the opposition, because even if they don't like you or respect you, they will respect your knowledge of them. And so in many cases, I knew as much about the Klan, if not more, than the leaders that I would talk to. So the first one to answer your question was the leader of the state of Maryland, which is called a Grand Dragon. And he went on later to become a national leader, which is called an Imperial Wizard. So I met with him. I had my secretary give him a call and not tell him that I was black. Just tell him, that she's working for somebody who's writing a book on the Ku Klux Klan. Would he agree to sit down and speak with me? And I knew that he would assume that this white woman on the other end of the phone was not working for a black man, because there were no black men writing books on the Klan. Mine was the first. So he agreed. He agreed. And we set it up, in a motel room, and she and I were already in the room. And when he showed up with his bodyguard, of course, he was, he walked into the room, he thought he was in the wrong room at first. And then he thought, this is an ambush. And I stood up and I displayed my hands to show I had nothing in my hands. And I walked towards him and put my hand out and said, "I'm Daryl Davis." And he shook my hand. And he sat down. The bodyguard stood at attention to his right. And he asked me for some identification, which I gave him. And then he made the remark, "Oh, you live on such and such a street in Silver Spring." And I'd already done my homework. But, that had made me a little uneasy that he was reciting my street address. So I said, "Yes, that is where I live, and you live at," and I named his house number and his street address. So that way I was leveling the playing field. But an interesting thing happened. I had a little bag beside me in which I had blank cassettes and things like that so I could record the conversation. And every time I would reach into the bag like this to pull out a fresh cassette, I'd reach down, his bodyguard would reach up to his gun. And after a while he relaxed and he realized there was no threat in the bag. But maybe an hour into this interview, there was a strange noise in the room and we all jumped. And I just knew that he had made this noise. I didn't know what the noise was, but I assumed that he made it because I didn't make it. And he assumed that I made it. So, we were having like a stare-off, and the bodyguard had his hand on his gun looking at both of us like, "Which one of you all made it?" Well, my secretary realized what had happened. We had a bucket of ice and cans of soda sitting on the dresser that I had, had her put there to get cold to offer beverages. And the ice had melted, and the cans had shifted down the ice, and that's what made the noise. But this was a teaching moment. I won't say it was a learning moment. The learning would come later. But it was a teaching moment because when we realized what it was, we all began laughing. Yeah, we're enemies. He's the head of the Klan, I'm a black guy. But in that moment, we were laughing together at how ignorant we all were, okay? Because the teaching moment was this: ignorance breeds fear. We fear those things that we don't understand. We didn't know what that noise was, so we became fearful of each other and accusatory of each other. Ignorance breeds fear. If you don't keep that fear in check, that fear in turn will breed hatred because we hate those things that we fear. If you don't keep that hatred in check, that hatred in turn will breed destruction because we want to destroy those things that we hate. Why? Because they frighten us. But guess what? They may have been harmless and we were just ignorant. So we had a laugh over our ignorance. And from that point forward, we were fine. And over time, this man eventually became one of my best friends. And he gave up the Ku Klux Klan. And today, I own his Robin Hood.
When Sandra was 10 years old, she lost a younger sister at a massacre in Burundi. She was from the Congo. She lived in Burundi. She's seen the worst of human nature. She resettled in Rochester, New York. And I read that she said, "I finally belong to a community that did not see me as an other." So tell us about your life before then and what happened to you in Rochester that made you feel that way.
So shout out to Rochester people. I didn't know that anybody came from Rochester. So I grew up in Congo. I had a very normal childhood, much like most of you, I think. I had a loving family. I went to good schools, and unfortunately, our government is not very stable. So we have been in civil wars for decades. And depending on where you are in Congo, it's caused by different things. For us, it was ethnic. So much like here in the US, our tribe was hated because of the way we look. No other reason, really. They believe that because of the language we speak, which is a dialect from Rwanda, and the way that we look, we have Rwandese features, that we belong to Rwanda, and that's where my ancestry is. But the thing is, my family has been living in Congo for over 300 years. So everything I know is in Congo. Yet I had never had a state ID. I was stateless until I was resettled in America. And that's not something we think about here, but it's a huge part of who you are. You don't even think about the fact that you have a Social Security, that your government knows who you are and is accountable for you. But for us, it was like we didn't exist. So I say that I was glad to belong to Rochester because for once I had an ID. I existed, for one. And secondly, I mean, I came to learn about racial disparity in America, but when I first arrived, it was, okay, this is a community, and even though they didn't know anything about me, it was still like, I felt so welcomed by the people who actually got to know me. And once they got to know me, once they got to know my story, they realized that the issues that we talk about here, the refugee crisis, they're not so far away from you. You just have to look to your neighbors because you don't know how they got there. And though you may think that they don't impact you or that you can never possibly meet someone who has lived that life, most of you probably would never have met a Congolese girl that got here via way of a huge massacre that took the lives of 166 people. But I don't say that to gain pity or anything like that. I say that to tell you how connected you are to the rest of the world. We are much more connected than we think and than we know. And the only way to know that is by talking to one another, to having these difficult conversations, having these conversations that we fear having because we're afraid of what the other person looks like or what they sound like, what language they're speaking, when everyone just wants to belong. My life in Rochester has been incredible because obviously I'm here on this stage with you guys. But what I would like to say is I got here because of opportunity. And ever since resettling to America, I have been trying to bring that opportunity to girls in Congo. Women and girls are the most vulnerable groups when it comes to migration, just life. And I cannot sit here and speak to you guys and not talk to you about the young girls that I work with in my organizations. My organization, Jimbere Fund, which I've been running for about 2 years now. And we go into communities and get ideas straight from people. And we just want to provide the opportunity that has gotten me here. I know how far that's taken me. It wasn't a handout. It was simply someone believing in me and telling me that I could achieve something. And I want to bring that to the rest of the world.
You know, it's the thing that has always amazed me about the part of Africa where your roots are is that it has been both the most violent and deadly part of Africa and often the world in recent years, and yet the wisest. And the typical greeting, she says she helps people who live in villages beyond the last dirt road. In the lake country of Africa, where I had a lot of AIDS projects and other things in our foundation, people meet each other walking. Nobody's got any wheel transportation. And someone says, hello, how are you? Good morning. The reply, translated into English, is not, I'm fine, how are you? It is, I see you. And every one of these people have said in one way or the other, that is the key to all this. We have to see people as they are. Which brings me to our youngest participant. That is, unless we got one of those TV geniuses who's 13 years old and already in college. Here. Thomas T.C. Edwards is a senior high school student at the Strake Jesuit College Prep School in Houston. And when Hurricane Harvey hit, He was a straight-A student who had once played football and is now a wrestler. You might notice he's not very big. I don't advise you to challenge him to a wrestling match. And he and his buddies got out and got in a boat when nobody knew what was going to happen, how high the water would fly, whatever, and went around trying to save people's lives. Total strangers. So tell us why you did it. Did your Jesuit education have anything to do with it? And how many people did you meet that were different from you, and what did you learn from them?
Well, I mean, I feel like anybody else would have done it, you know, granted that they have the resources, but as we were sitting on the Connors front porch, we could just hear the people screaming, and the water continued to rise, and as the boat lifted up off the trailer, we were like, all right, got to do something. And his parents were really reluctant to let us go, but we decided to go anyways, and we didn't really know what to expect. But when we went out there, we sort of downplayed, you know, the dangers posed. And it wasn't until later that night when we, you know, kind of talked about it, and we were like, wow, like so many things could have gone wrong. And I guess my high school's ideology of, you know, being men for others and it being a Jesuit high school is, I mean, it made an impact on all of us, because that little proverb is what really came into action that day. And we met a lot of strangers, and I, you know, didn't know their names. They didn't know mine. But, you know, they got in the boat with us, and we would take them to the local supermarket. And sort of one of the ways that I figured out I could assimilate with other people that I don't even know was just to share a laugh. And as we'd be trolling down the street in 9 feet of water, I'd be like, hey, Liam, you know, you've always wanted a lake house. Or I'd be like, Declan, like, it's a stop sign. Are you crazy? Like, slow down. And, you know, these people had lost everything. And Liam's house hadn't flooded yet. But, I mean, they were just devastated. And I mean, we were trying to lighten the mood and, you know, sort of alleviate some of their anguish. But, I mean, they laughed, and we laughed, and, you know, we saved a lot of people. But just assimilating with people that are a lot different than you is not as hard as some people think. You know, just by having a simple conversation can, you know, really open up your mind.
He sounds like one of those stolid characters in Western movies. I've actually been in 100-year floods, 500-year floods, and to the site of hurricanes immediately after they passed. I'm telling you, they could have drowned doing what they were doing. And he did it. And the reason we were just talking on the way out, because I'm not a Roman Catholic, but I did go to Georgetown University, the oldest Jesuit school in the country. And as most of you probably know, the Pope is the first Jesuit Pope in the history of the Catholic Church. And he says that we should greet other people without regard to their race or their faith with a culture of encounter. And he's a walking, living advertisement for that. Look at him. I mean, he's in that. I'm just telling you, I'm not trying to embarrass him. But a lot of people could have said, man, look at me. I got everything going for me. And I'd kind of like to go do something for somebody else. But I mean, hey, I got to go to college and have a good life and do all this stuff, and I could drown out there. So there is this long-term commitment you can make, or in an instant you could be called upon to be a citizen in a way you had never been before. And we all think, we'd like to think we would do the right thing. But it's hard to know. He did the right thing. And I also respect your family for letting you do it.
Thank you, sir.
And you reminded me of somebody, and just give me a little personal indulgence here to tell you. It's in 1995 when we had the 500-year flood along the Mississippi River. I went to Iowa, to one of the places most flooded. And I was visiting all the people, and I noticed a young woman delivering, I can barely talk about this, delivering sandwiches to the people who were stacking heavy sandbags. And she was stunted in her growth and bones protruding everywhere. It was obvious she was born with brittle bone disease. At 12, she had already had 11 surgeries. She was from Wisconsin, and her father brought her to Iowa to do that, knowing that these big sandbags, one of them could have hit her and broken her body again, and she could have gone back. And I asked her dad, I said, you know, I only have one daughter, and she means more to me than anything. Why'd you do this? He said, because my daughter is determined not to be a victim, but a servant. And she said, so I followed this young woman through her whole life. She went to American University for a while, then she went home and graduated from the University of Wisconsin, and she worked in the kind of work you're here to celebrate until she had to go to hospice and pass away about 20 years after I first met her. She didn't have a long life, but she had a life that was full, deciding not to be a victim, but a servant. And I thought about that. So thanks for taking a chance. And I want to go back around now. Tell us how you started your clothing line. What are the results of it? And what do you think how do you think we can do more to get Americans who are not comfortable with our Muslim population to be comfortable? And I want to just go on a little riff here. I'm not trying to be political. But you need to know this. The crime rate among all immigrants, including undocumented immigrants, is half the crime rate of the native born. The small business formation rate, here is Exhibit A, even though she's not an immigrant, the small business formation rate among immigrants is twice that of the native born. And in spite of all the mass shootings, the murder rate among Muslim Americans is 1/3 of that of the native born, non-Muslim. So we owe these people a lot. They are making such a contribution to our country. And what I want to know is, why did you do this? And do you think it will help us grow together or grow apart? And what is your, besides doing what you're doing today, tell us what you think we should be doing to reduce anti-Muslim prejudice in America.
Well, first of all, when I qualified for the Olympic team, quite a long time ago now, it seems, it was February of 2016. First of all, I found out with all of you online. I didn't know I had qualified yet, but I found out through a Google alert, which is kind of funny to me now. But so I qualified for the Olympic team, and all of a sudden my life changed, right? It all of a sudden went from being about this journey through sport, this very arduous journey in sport, now all of a sudden kind of flipping this narrative, the Muslim narrative, on its head. When we think about Muslims, and particularly Muslim women, media has kind of perpetuated this narrative of who the Muslim woman is, right? She's Arab, she wears all black, She probably doesn't speak English. She's oppressed, she's docile, she doesn't have a voice of her own. And now it's like, here I come. I'm African American, I'm not Arab. I'm American by birth. For many, many generations. I'm Muslim born. I play sports. I'm very active. I'm very verbal. I'm chatty. I'm not docile at all. And here I am representing Team USA and on the world's biggest stage of sport. And for a lot of people, it's very hard to kind of wrap their mind around seeing a Muslim woman participate in sport, but also see a black person fence, right? There are not very many of us, but it was this opportunity for me to be more than just present for myself, right? But to show people a different view of Islam, and also for it to happen during the presidential election, at the height of the presidential election, where the Muslim community is under this microscope. I felt like it's what not just we as a community, as Americans, what we needed, but also what Muslims needed. We needed like a different image than what people are used to seeing, and to challenge these misconceptions and stereotypes that people have about who we are. To be an American, there's so much opportunity, and within the Muslim community, as a woman, as a millennial, I always struggled to find clothes to wear that were modest and fashionable, to be quite honest. I was tired of going to like Zara or H&M or wherever and having to layer my clothes. So I was on the phone with my brother one day, and as a public figure, especially within the Muslim community and outside, as a member of former Secretary Clinton's Empowering Women and Girls Through Sports initiative, I was traveling a lot. I was looking for long sleeve modest options to speak in front of, hundreds of people in, and my brother just suggested that I start this clothing line, or to make my own dresses. That was his first thought, and I thought he was crazy because I don't know how to sew, but there was this opportunity there to fill a void within the U.S. market for modest clothing, for millennials who want to be fashionable, who don't want to spend a lot of money, but also want to adhere to the tenets of their faith. So that's where Luella was born, and it's been this amazing opportunity for me to have, I guess, a purpose outside of sport, and to fill a void, really. And I've really enjoyed it for a multitude of reasons, but also it allows me to be a small business owner out in Los Angeles, California. Yeah.
Do you ever encounter either prejudice or fear directly?
Microaggressions every day, but quick story. When I moved, or I was in LA, I was renting a car in Los Angeles a few weeks ago, and when I've never told this story before. I don't even know if I should tell the story. I'm like looking for my manager who's not here. She's probably like, no, don't do it. But a woman at a rental car agency, accused me of having a stolen credit card and license. And I mean, there was no evidence of this. I was shocked. I was like looking behind me. I was like, is she talking to me? There was no one else there. It was just me. It was just this bizarre moment in my life where I felt like I was being accused of receiving stolen property. It was this really defamatory statement. And when you are the subject of discrimination or racism, right, you don't, stop the situation, raise your hand and be like, hey, are you mad at me because I'm Muslim? Is like, you don't like women? Do you not like black people? Like, I didn't know what the issue was. I just knew I was being accused of like receiving stolen property. And it was this, this happened to me a few weeks ago. And it was one of the most offensive moments, hurtful moments, and also it made me realize that it can happen to anyone. And that's something that I swear, when I say I experience all the time, these moments of like, man, this is happening to me as, an American Olympian who's won a medal for our country. These are the things that happen to me. They can happen to anyone, and I feel like we have a long way to go, especially now, because we're in this really, really difficult moment where there's a lot of othering that's happening, where we are placing labels on people that don't need to be there. And I tell that story not to call out this company, I won't say their name, but to say that something like this happened to me, just a few days ago, and it's hurtful. And I know that even as an American Olympian, I still, am the subject of discrimination, and yeah.
So you told us a nice story about the head of the Klan in Maryland. Now tell us a not so nice story. You confronted a lot of Klansmen. Tell us a tougher sell you had to make and what happened. Tell us something that's not so pretty.
Well, we look at Charlottesville, which is 2 hours from where I live. That was not so pretty. And I want to clear something up as to what Charlottesville was all about. Okay, it was not about the removal of the Robert E. Lee statue. That had nothing to do with why people were gathered there. Okay, and let me just prove that to you by making 2 points. First of all, if you know American history, you know that there were blacks and there were Jews who also fought on the side of the Confederacy in the South. And there are descendants today of those blacks and Jews, some of whom also want to uphold the Confederate heritage. I know some myself who have joined Confederate organizations because of their ancestry or whatever, and that's fine, that's their prerogative, all right? But the people who gathered there in Charlottesville, in fact, I was there all day yesterday with the Klan and some other white supremacists who had a court date there yesterday. Anyway, these people claim to be descendants of ancestors on the side of the Confederacy. That's fine, but why not invite their black and their Jewish counterparts to march with them to preserve the Robert E. Lee statue? Wouldn't that carry more weight if you wanted to save that statue, to have everybody who fought together for that? But no, instead, they excluded the blacks and the Jews and instead marched through Charlottesville yelling anti-Semitic and anti-black sentiments. So it was not about heritage, it was about hate. That's number one. Number two, none of the people that you saw in the videos ever knew their great-great-great ancestors in the Confederacy, because those people were dead before these people were born. But if you want to honor them, that's fine. However, they did know their closer-in ancestors, such as their fathers, their grandfathers, and if they were lucky enough, they may have met their great-grandfathers. Some of these closer-in ancestors fought in World War II. Many of these American fathers, grandfathers, and great-grandfathers lost their lives fighting in World War II, or lost a limb. And who were they fighting? They were fighting the Nazis, Adolf Hitler. So how do you honor your great ancestors and then disgrace your closer-in ancestors by marching down the streets of Charlottesville wearing swastikas and proclaiming Nazi ideology? That makes no sense. It was not about the statue. So I was invited about 3 weeks ago to address a meeting of the Tennessee and Kentucky Ku Klux Klan. They invited me to come down to their meeting and speak to them, and I did. And that's exactly what I told them. And many of them thought about it and ended up agreeing with me.
Yeah, I think it's very important. Let's give a minute. One of the reasons that doing what he does is so important, and each of us in our own way need to find some way to get out of our comfort zone, is that really, by any objective measure, the election notwithstanding, the country is less racist, homophobic, religiously bigoted, and sexist than it ever has been before. It's just all hanging out there now for obvious reasons. And also, and we do have a new bigotry in America, most of us, that even some of us in this audience, and even me on my bad days, are a part of. We just don't want to be around anybody that disagrees with us. And so we self-select our news sources, we self-select our encounters, we self-select. So I admire this guy because he did exactly the opposite. And you can't have a culture of encounter if you say, I want to encounter interesting new people who know more than I do about nuclear physics. But dear God, I don't want to encounter anybody who fundamentally has a different take on things than I do.
We have to get out of that echo chamber.
Yeah, I mean, you know, and the reason, let me say, the reason I identify with it, my great-great-grandfather, Thomas Blythe, was a Confederate soldier from Alabama. When I was born in Arkansas at the end of World War II, my state had a per capita income barely half the national average. My grandfather, my mother's father, whom I adored, wept once during the Depression because he couldn't afford $1 to buy his daughter a new Easter dress. And I was forced to wear a new outfit at Easter during my childhood when I was fat and awkward and looked terrible in all those 50s pastel colors because my mother was redeeming her father's tears. I was the first person in my family ever to go to college. I know exactly what went on. But I want to tell you something about Charlottesville and why we've got to be careful to encounter without caving, but with caring. Virginia has a good claim to be, along with Philadelphia and New York, the most essential parts of the beginning of the United States. 4 of our first 5 presidents were from Virginia. The last battle of the Civil War at Yorktown was fought, the Revolutionary War was fought in Virginia. Our first president, George Washington, was a Virginian who not only was a military commander, but set the example of leaving after 2 terms before it was legally required. Thomas Jefferson wrote the Declaration of Independence, you know the whole deal. Okay, so Virginia's been important since the beginning. There are 2 monuments in Virginia to the Revolutionary War. World War I was a pretty big deal. We lost 168,000 people. There are 5 monuments to World War I. World War II was a pretty big deal. There are 6 monuments. There are 268 monuments to the Civil War. This is not about the Civil War. It is not about our history. This was every time Robert E. Lee, who had many admirable qualities, did not want statues erected to him because he thought it would interfere with reconciliation. Now, he was no angel and he had slaves, but he had enough sense to know after the war that if we wanted to get on with the future, we didn't need to be living in the past. So as soon as the toughest Reconstruction let up, statues go up. As soon as Jim Crow comes along, more statues go up. During the Red Scare and all the right wing in the 20s, statues go up. So I don't want to be disrespectful of history, but there are all kinds of options. And that's another thing. If you live in a place where this is a dispute, I urge you to have a conversation. In Poland, for example, or Hungary, I'm embarrassed, I don't remember which one. After the fall of the Berlin Wall and the end of communism, they didn't erase communist history. They gathered up all those statues, many of which are artistically important because of the work that was done, and they built a park and put them all there. Said, you want to know about our history? Go look. Mitch Landrieu, the mayor of New Orleans, said, Robert E. Lee on a 30-foot statue in Jackson Square is not about the Civil War in our history. I'm going to take it down. We're a majority minority city now, and they used to sell slaves on the streets in New Orleans. But I don't want to disrespect him, so we're going to gather all these statues up and set up a special park and let people go in and see the history and learn the history. so that we can accommodate the present and what we hope will be the future of New Orleans to the past. There's a lot of ways to slice and dice this, but it's very important not to let people get away with pretending this is all about history when so many people are trying to propagate divisions today. If we're going to go forward together, we got to figure out how to do it. And the answer is to stand up for what you believe in and confront and reach out. That's why I'm telling you, I wish we had 1,000 African Americans like you who would go seek out Klan members, because most of them are just following the crowd with the people that live in their neighborhood, doing what seems to be done. And there's some good there that can be much better. And you give them a chance. And they give you a chance to learn, and I think that's important.
Absolutely. You know, we need to stop saying, I'm not my brother's keeper, and let's all become our brother's keeper. We all are Americans. We all have to live in this country together. We all need to go forward together, and we all need to better our society together. I have a philosophy that when two enemies are talking, they're not fighting, they're talking. They might be a little loud, might be beating their fists on the table to drive home a point in disagreement, but at least they're talking. It's when the conversation ceases that the ground becomes fertile for violence. So you want to keep the conversation going.
In the places where you work in the Congo, are there any tribal tensions?
Yeah. And
so how do you navigate them, and how do you bring people together?
Well, we think that a lot of conflict stems from lack of opportunity. I feel like if people had more opportunities, there would be less to fight about. But since people are hungry, kids aren't in school, if you get sick, you have to walk 3 days to reach the nearest hospital. There's a lot to be angry about. So we believe at Jimbere Fund, we believe that providing opportunities and working with the community will force members of the communities who otherwise wouldn't work together to work with each other. Because at the end of the day, their livelihoods matter more than their beliefs. So if we say that, hey, there's this project, but in order to participate, you actually have to talk to one another and have to work with one another and speak to one another, then they start talking to one another and realize that they're similar and they live in a country that unfortunately has forgotten them, and it's not their fault and it's not their neighbor's fault. It's governance. And once people understand that a lot of their problems don't come from, their neighbor who looks different or sounds different, then we can really start working towards the problems that are keeping us divided, which is poverty and lack of good education. So when we tackle all of those things, but we can't achieve progress unless we start having these conversations, unless we really go into your neighbors' homes and say, hello, where are you from? Let me get to know you. And not just the stereotypical, oh, what's your name, where do you go to school? If you met me on the street, you would never have guessed that I'm from Congo. I think my accent is getting better now. You can't tell, right? No? Okay, I thought it was getting better. I say all that to say that there's a lot of work to be done, and we are all so capable of changing the world that we live in. But in order to do that, we have to foster these conversations, and you have to be willing. You cannot wait for somebody else to start that conversation or to go to that rally. You have to show up. And if you don't show up, don't expect for me to show up for you. You have to be there. And in Congo, how we do that is by simply saying, hey, we're here, we're gonna give opportunity, but in order to participate, you have to have a conversation.
Has the government ever tried to make your work more difficult?
Well, I'm not a very quiet person when it comes to injustice. I'm very outspoken, and It doesn't matter who you are. If I believe that you are doing something to harm someone else, I will tell you, and I will speak it very loudly. And for that reason, well, of course, they don't want me speaking out against them and telling the world of what, that their people are suffering while they're selling our country. So I will say it. Plain and simple.
Do you feel safe when you're there?
Well, unfortunately, I haven't been able to go back because of the Civil War. So I probably wouldn't be the safest person in Congo. My colleagues do go there, and I'm not able to go because of, I'm a public figure and I speak out against a lot of the injustices. But that's not really why I'm unable to go. It's also the safety issue. Again, there's a civil war in Congo, and it's been going on for decades, and people really need us to pay attention.
More people have been killed in that conflict in the last 15 years than in any other place on earth. It's important. Almost no one knows it because there's no constant presence of CNN, and it just sort of looks normal. And Congo's a vast, vast country, the third biggest rainforest in the world. Incredibly valuable, beautiful place. But I really respect you for doing this. And the reason I ask about the tribal differences is that Rwanda has been criticized for basically making it illegal to run for office, identifying yourself as a member of a tribe. But they did lose 10% of their population in 90 days, largely to machetes, because all that mattered was whether you were a Hutu or a Tutsi or a sympathizer of the Tutsis. And now, I mean, miraculous things have happened. When you think there's a conflict in your community you can't get over, remember this, when I went to Rwanda the second time in 2001, they had set up these villages where they would give people property, but only if they agreed to live next door to someone of the other ethnic group. Then they give you property to build a house. I personally stood with two women holding hands. One of them's husband and brother had been killed. The other, a Hutu, husband was before the International War Crimes Tribunal for ordering the deaths of hundreds of people. These women were holding hands. They said we have to begin again.
I was actually in Rwanda a few months ago now with a nonprofit called Kids Play International in partnership with Sports United on just a sports diplomacy trip. And I was there with a bunch of other athletes, some like NFL players, some soccer players, and we essentially, I mean, to be in this environment, like you said, to be amongst people who have experienced such horrific genocide recently, right? I mean, I know that 25 years ago seems pretty far off, but this is very recent, to have people live side by side who have been at the receiving end of it and have also may have committed these crimes. To me, it's interesting to see how they deal with genocide and how, they, as a community, have decided this is on the table, we're going to talk about it, we're going to make sure that we educate even the youth about it to make sure it doesn't happen again. And I think that's a little bit different experience for us as Americans. And we spoke about this backstage, and that I think we're almost missing that component. We shy away from talking about, the Trail of Tears and Japanese internment and slavery, and we pretend as if they didn't exist, as opposed to, talking about our history and saying this is exactly what happened. We are going to make sure it doesn't happen again. And maybe if we were to talk about it more, maybe we won't have, the crazies we have now, committing all these terrible acts. So.
And we were saying, tragedies aren't a political issue, So when things like Vegas happen, they're not political issues. We need to have these conversations that are very hard. Charlottesville, like all of these you cannot feel attacked. Your ideas cannot feel attacked because at the end of the day, we're talking about people's lives, and that's the most important thing. And we want to protect each and every American. And in order to do that, we have to have these conversations.
Indeed we do. And it troubles me. It troubles me as an American that we invented the technology to put a man on the moon and to talk to that man, Neil Armstrong, while he was walking around making that great statement about one small step for mankind, one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind. We could talk to him live from Earth via satellite radio phone. We invented that technology. Everybody in this place has a cell phone. Everybody in this place has email. Hit a few numbers, hit a few words, hit send. You're talking to people, right next door in the next state or across the country or in Africa, China, Australia, wherever you want. How is it that we as Americans can talk to people as far away as the moon or anywhere on the face of this earth, but yet we have difficulty speaking to the person who lives right next door because he or she is a different color, ethnicity, religion, persuasion, etc.? It seems to me that in the 21st century, we need to get our ideology to catch up to our technology. We are living in space-age times, but there's still too many of us thinking with Stone Age minds, and we've got to change that.
Did you go to the Holocaust Museum when you were there?
No, I went to the Memorial Museum.
Holocaust Memorial, yeah.
Yeah.
It's right outside Kigali on the hill. You saw it.
I did. I was there, yeah.
Okay, let me just tell you about this. I helped them finish it. And it's the most remarkable memorial because it's basically a massive crypt on 3 layers into the side of a hill where there are the bones of 300,000 people because they have no embalming, and people brought their loved ones' bones and deposited them there and registered them in a roll of honor. And then off to the side, there's a little building which you enter, and Africans don't have the same horror of bones and things we do, so there's a big canister, clear canister, full of bones as you go in the door. And they wanted me to go there, I don't know, probably been 10 years ago now, long time ago, because I helped them finish the museum. I helped them raise the money to finish and everything. And this young man, he was a dazzlingly good-looking guy. He looked like he had a Harvard MBA and was about to be cast in a movie in his 3-piece suit and everything. So he's giving me a tour. And it shows, the plane bearing the presidents of Burundi and Rwanda being shot down, the whole 9 yards, and how the conflict started and what happened and what the radio talkers did. They have radio talk shows there then. And so I said to this young man, I said, "Did you lose anyone?" He said, "Yeah, my mother, my father, 2 of my brothers." He said, "Wait, if you stop at my first cousin's, 73 people." This guy who looked like he didn't have a care in the world, 73 people. And I said, "This must be really hard for you." And he said, "No. Our president says we have to know what happened and understand it so we can make sure it doesn't happen again and so we can let it go and go on with our lives, so we can let it go." So I said to him, the first time I came here, I met a woman who reminds me of you. She had lost her husband and 5 children. She woke in a pool of her own blood, and they were all dead around her. And she said she was angry at God that she survived. And she realized she was spared for a reason, and it couldn't be something as mean as vengeance. So she started a program where she basically developed an orphanage and then put children out for adoption without regard to their ethnic group. I said, she was amazing. He smiled and he said, "I should. She's my aunt." The point I'm trying to make is a lot of these challenges are challenges of the mind as well as the heart. It's how you think and how you feel. And somehow we've got to free ourselves of manifestly self-destructive behavior. And I believe that's why I ask about your projects and about your clothing line and about his book and experiences, and about you being on the boat. I think that the whole reason we do CGIU is partly to help, because the doers are always more benefited if you do it right than the people you're trying to help. Because it puts you in a place where you can be free. And I think it's important. So, did anything happen to you during this Harvey experience that you think will change the way you think about anything, or change what you wanted to do with your life, or change what you think the rest of us should be doing?
Well, honestly, I don't think it really changed much, other than like basically how I should appreciate life, and that, you know, all these material goods don't matter. And like that day I lost my truck, and like that was everything to me. But I was like, you want to know, like, this doesn't matter. Like, that's not a life. It can be replaced. And we kept on driving by it all day, and I was like, you want to know what? Like, it was worth it. Like, I'd much rather be saving people. Like, it's just a car. But probably one of the most like profound experiences that day, it was when we were going down the street, and we saw this dump truck that was stalled out in the middle of the road, and the water was all the way up to its door handles. And there were two men that worked for the city of Houston that were clinging onto a tree, and neither of them knew how to swim. And they told us that they had been there for about 2 hours, and they were sent to, you know, take people out of their houses and evacuate them. And as we loaded them onto the boat, I was like, wow, you know, we're rescuing the rescuers. And that had a big impact on me. And then I asked them, I was like, so, like, do they pay y'all enough for this? And they were like, no.
Let me ask you this. I want you to think about this. I grew up in a little town in Arkansas called Hot Springs. It was set aside by Congress as the first national reserve before we had national parks in 1832. The old part of town is in a little valley, and Hernando de Soto came there in 1542 and found that Native Americans bathing in these hot sulfur springs and thought he'd found the fountain of youth. I'm Exhibit A. He didn't. But anyway, one time we had this amazing flood, flash flood. The water was flowing through the valley at 30 miles an hour. This baby was on top of the water, going down at 30 miles an hour, and miraculously, a little baby had been ripped out of its mother's arms, and miraculously he had not sunk. Here's a light pole. These two big brawny guys, one got on the light pole, and the other went out into the water holding his friend's hand, and he stretched at the last minute, miraculously saved this baby's life. You'll remember what you did all your life. What I hope you can do is to get people to behave every day a little more like they behaved in those days. To remember that the most important thing is life and liberty and love and the opportunity to give something to somebody else. You can do that. People 3 times your age will listen to you, because when you laid something on the line and you found something important, you have to convince people, I think, that we can live that way every day. That we shouldn't wait till our neighbors' lives are in danger to treat them like our neighbors. That's what I hope you'll do, because you're good. You are really good at this. So they're telling me we should stop. Anybody want to make a closing comment?
Sure. I'll make a closing comment. Sorry, that was so loud. I just want to encourage you guys to go out into the world and get to know the people you live next to. Like, really get to know them, and make sure that you approach everyone with love and kindness, and also read my book, How Dare the Sunrise.
And also, I mean, I'm a firm believer that God has gifted us each with something amazing, and we owe it not just to ourselves, but to the people around us to find out what that is and to use it as a source of good and as a proponent of change. So I encourage you all to find out what that is and to do your best to make the world better for tomorrow.
Well, first and foremost, I want to thank President Clinton and the Clinton Global Initiative for having us all here and sharing our stories. Thank you, sir. But, you know, each one of you all are here because your parents wanted a better life for you than they had. My parents certainly went through a lot of Jim Crow stuff, so I would be able to sit in the front of the bus, drink from the same water fountain, use the same restroom, etc. It's only right that I try to contribute to my society as well to make it better for the future, and the same thing for all of you all. Thank you.
I would just like to say that without the Connor family and them letting me stay at their house, that none of that would have happened that day. And I would also like to thank my mom for coming here. Otherwise, I wouldn't be able to iron my clothes.
Where is she, your mother? Stand up. Stand up, give her a hand. Thank you. He's the best dressed guy here. My mother would have been proud of you. I want to leave you with this thought. Several of these commitments involve the opioid crisis in America. Our common humanity works both ways. If we don't lift each other up, we're going to tear each other down. Hillary and I have lost, or have 5 friends who've lost their children to this. One African American whose father went to law school with us from Houston, wildly successful, whose mother has a PhD in biochemistry, and she was a genius, but nobody ever told her genius that she couldn't mix these painkillers with any form of alcohol and fall asleep because it kills a part of your brain, it kills your body to keep breathing. One was the son of a first-generation Indian immigrant who was wildly successful, and this young man worked for me and then worked for Hillary and was luminous. Same thing happened. One was the only son of a Kosovar Albanian Muslim American who lives across the street from Hillary and me. They have 5 children, 4 daughters, and a son, and the same thing happened to him. And 2 were old-fashioned, white-bread Arkansas people whose parents were friends of mine going back forever and a day. We are bound together in ways for good and ill. And I want you to think about this. You mentioned Neil Armstrong walking on the moon. We celebrated the 30th anniversary of that when I was president. So it'll soon be time for the 50th. And NASA came in and gave me a rock Neil Armstrong took off the moon in a vacuum-packed case and said, this thing has been carbon dated at 3.6 billion years old. I laughed and I said, can I borrow it while I'm still here? And they let me borrow it. And I put it, you know when you see the president on TV in the Oval Office and he's sitting in a chair, somebody from another country sitting in another chair, people sitting in the couches on the side, there's a table in the middle. I put the moon rock on the table. And for the rest of my time, whenever people would come to see me and they were mad at me or mad at each other, we were having a fight in Congress, having a fight. Every time things got a little heated, I said, wait a minute, take a look at that rock. I said, that rock is 3.6 billion years old. We are all just passing through. Our life is the blink of a moment. We cannot afford to waste it on being petty and angry and narrow-minded when there is so much left to do. And you know, it's interesting. It had an astonishing effect on people. It never failed to make people at least stop and think. Every one of you has some ability to make people stop and think. They make people stop and think. One, I never thought I'd see a Muslim woman win an Olympic medal in swordplay, even with an épée. Two, I never thought I'd see a black guy who was a musician actually seeking out the Ku Klux Klan. Maybe I should pay for mental health insurance. Three, look at this neat woman. What is she fooling with those people? She finally escapes, and she still cares about her roots, no matter how violent and dangerous it is. And four, here's a guy who looked out, he stepped out of a bandbox, but when he was needed, he got in a boat with his high school buddies and risked his life to go save people he didn't know and didn't care what their race was, what their religion was, what their income was. Each of them in their own way decided to be human, and to be human not just by feeling the right things and thinking the right things, but by doing the right things. That's what you're here for. And no matter how cynical you think things are now, and how dark you feel from time to time, remember, in the end, we're all just passing through. The river of time catches us all, and all that matters is what we do. Don't be judged by others. Do what makes you more human, and that's connecting with other people in a positive way. God bless you all. Thank you, and thank you. Let's give them a big hand.